There are families that never need to say, "You are a disappointment" out loud, because the way they look at someone else already tells you everything. Nathan Hale understood that feeling better than anyone. In the Hale family, his older brother Dominic was treated like royalty. Every achievement Dominic made became the center of attention. When Dominic opened his architecture company, their parents hosted a giant celebration dinner. When his projects appeared in magazines, framed copies were displayed proudly across the living room walls. Meanwhile, Nathan could barely remember the last time anyone in the family asked him how he was doing. To them, he was simply the son who spent his days inside a noisy garage covered in engine oil, while his brilliant older brother built luxury towers for millionaires. Family gatherings became exhausting for Nathan. Relatives constantly compared the two brothers, as if it were some kind of entertainment. Dominic always arrived wearing expensive suits and carrying luxury car keys that impressed everyone at the table. Nathan usually came straight from work wearing faded jeans, because he could not afford anything else. Every conversation somehow turned into another reminder that he was the less successful son. One evening during Thanksgiving dinner, Nathan quietly mentioned that he had been researching new battery systems after work. Before he could explain further, his father laughed and cut him off. "You should focus on fixing cars first, before trying to change the world." The entire table burst into laughter, including Dominic, who smirked while sipping his wine. Nathan forced a smile, but deep down the humiliation stayed with him, long after the dinner ended. The painful truth was that nobody in the Hale family ever cared enough to understand Nathan's dreams. They assumed that because he worked in a small garage, he lacked ambition or intelligence. What they never saw were the endless nights he spent alone, inside a freezing warehouse, experimenting with energy cells and sketching ideas across stained notebooks. While everyone slept, Nathan taught himself engineering concepts through old online lectures and borrowed textbooks. Many nights he stayed awake until sunrise, trying to solve problems nobody believed he was capable of understanding. Sometimes his experiments failed so badly that smoke filled the entire warehouse. Sometimes he lost weeks of work in a single night. But even during the hardest moments, Nathan refused to quit, because building something meaningful had become the only thing keeping him alive emotionally. Yet every time he returned home, reality crushed him again. His mother constantly praised Dominic in front of guests, while speaking about Nathan, with embarrassment hidden beneath fake politeness. "He's still trying to figure life out," she would say softly, whenever someone asked about her younger son. Nathan learned to stay quiet, because defending himself only made people mock him more. Over time, silence became his safest place. But what hurt Nathan most was not the insults. It was realizing that his own family had already decided who deserved love and respect, long before either son had the chance to prove themselves. In their eyes, Dominic represented success, while Nathan represented failure, and nothing Nathan did seemed capable of changing that narrative. Still, somewhere deep inside him, a small part of Nathan believed his life would not remain this way forever. He could not explain why. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was hope, or maybe it was the quiet confidence built during thousands of lonely nights when nobody else believed in him. What the Hale family did not realize was that the son they laughed at inside that tiny garage was slowly building an idea powerful enough to one day shock the entire world. And sometimes the people treated like they are nothing become the ones nobody can ignore later. If you have ever felt underestimated by your own family, feel free to share your story in the comments, because you never know who might need to hear that they are not alone. Some people grow up believing they are loved equally inside their family until one day they realize love was never equal at all. Nathan Hale learned that lesson slowly through hundreds of small moments nobody else would have considered cruel. In the Hale family, Dominic was not just the successful son. He was the son everyone protected, admired, and proudly displayed to the world. Nathan, meanwhile, felt more like an inconvenience people tolerated out of obligation. The difference became painfully obvious every time relatives visited their house. Nathan's mother always called Dominic downstairs first, so guests could hear about his newest luxury building project, or the wealthy clients he worked with. Nathan was usually asked to help in the kitchen carry boxes from the garage, or stay quiet while adults talked about important careers. It reached a point where Nathan could predict exactly how every conversation would go before it even started. His father would brag about Dominic's expensive contracts, his mother would smile proudly, and eventually someone would ask Nathan whether he was still working with cars. The question always carried hidden disappointment, as if his entire existence had become a problem nobody knew how to fix. Over time, Nathan stopped trying to defend himself because he realized nobody truly wanted to hear his side. What hurt most was not that Dominic succeeded. Nathan genuinely admired how hard his older brother worked. The real pain came from knowing that no matter what he accomplished, his family had already decided he would always come second. One Christmas dinner became impossible for Nathan to forget. The entire family gathered around the table, while Dominic announced he had signed a major contract to design luxury resorts for wealthy investors. Everyone applauded loudly. His mother even cried with pride, while his father raised a glass and called Dominic the future of the Hale family. Then the attention shifted toward Nathan. One aunt politely asked whether he enjoyed working at the garage. Before Nathan could answer, Dominic laughed softly and said, "At least someone has to fix our cars while the rest of us build successful lives." The room exploded with laughter. Nathan smiled weakly, so nobody would notice the humiliation burning inside him. But something changed in him that night. For the first time, he realized his family no longer saw him as someone capable of becoming more. They had reduced him to a role they felt comfortable with, the struggling younger brother who would never measure up. After dinner, Nathan stood alone outside in the freezing cold, while laughter echoed from inside the house. He stared through the window, watching Dominic surrounded by admiration, while he himself felt completely invisible. That was the moment Nathan silently promised himself something important. He would stop chasing approval from people who only valued success when it came wrapped in status and prestige. Instead of wasting energy trying to impress his family, Nathan poured himself deeper into his work and secret research. Every insult became fuel. Every comparison pushed him harder. He spent endless nights studying battery technology, engineering systems, and renewable energy trends while the rest of the world slept. Nobody encouraged him. Nobody believed in him. But somewhere deep inside, Nathan started understanding that the strongest people are often built in complete silence. Meanwhile, Dominic continued becoming more arrogant with every success. At family gatherings, he constantly offered Nathan fake advice about finding direction in life, speaking to him with the same tone wealthy people sometimes use towards someone they pity. Nathan usually stayed quiet, because arguing only gave people another excuse to mock him. Yet despite everything, one question continued haunting him late at night. If he ever became successful, would his family finally love him differently? Or would they only pretend to care, because the world suddenly decided he mattered? Sometimes the saddest realization is discovering that people treat you according to what you can offer their image, not according to your heart. And what the Hale family still did not understand was that the quiet son they constantly overlooked was getting dangerously close to proving all of them wrong. If this story feels painfully familiar to you, make sure to subscribe, because the next part becomes even more emotional when Nathan's secret life slowly begins changing everything. The most dangerous kind of humiliation is the one disguised as a joke, because everyone laughs while you quietly break inside. Nathan Hale understood that feeling too well. By the time another family reunion arrived, he had already grown used to being treated like the disappointing son nobody expected much from. Dominic arrived that evening, driving a brand new luxury car that immediately became the center of attention. Relatives crowded around him in admiration, while cameras flashed and compliments filled the driveway. Nathan pulled up several minutes later in his old pickup truck with grease stains still visible on his sleeves after finishing a late shift at the garage. Nobody noticed him arrive. It almost felt normal at this point. Inside the house, Dominic entertained relatives with stories about expensive clients, celebrity architects, and glamorous business dinners in New York. Every word made the family prouder. Nathan sat quietly near the end of the table, barely speaking unless someone directly addressed him. He had learned long ago that talking about his own dreams only invited ridicule. Still, despite everything, a small part of him hoped that maybe this night would feel different. Maybe for once someone would ask about his life with genuine interest instead of hidden judgment. But that hope disappeared quickly. During dinner, one of Dominic's business partners asked Nathan what he did for a living. Before Nathan could answer properly, Dominic leaned back in his chair with a smirk and said Nathan keeps our family humble. While the rest of us chase success, he makes sure somebody still knows how to change engine oil. Laughter exploded across the table instantly. Even people who barely knew Nathan joined in, because nobody wanted to ruin the mood by defending him. Nathan forced himself to smile, even though every word felt like another knife pushed deeper into his chest. Then Dominic added something that made the humiliation even worse. Honestly, if Nathan ever became rich, I think the entire world would stop making sense. More laughter followed. Nathan looked down at his plate while heat burned across his face. In that moment he realized his family no longer saw him as a real person, with feelings, ambitions, or intelligence. To them, he had become the family failure. Everyone used to make themselves feel more successful. His mother tried to calm the situation by softly saying, "Dominic is only joking," but Nathan noticed she was smiling too. That hurt more than the joke itself, because deep down he knew she agreed. After dinner, Nathan walked outside to get air while the party continued behind him. The cold night wind hit his face as he stood alone near his truck staring into darkness. For several minutes, he simply listened to distant laughter coming from inside the house. Every sound reminded him how invisible he truly was to the people who were supposed to know him best. Part of Nathan wanted to leave immediately and never return. Another part of him wanted to storm back inside and finally tell everyone the truth about the secret research he had been building for years. He imagined showing them the prototypes hidden inside his warehouse. He imagined watching their expressions change when they realized the garage mechanic understood technology better than most people in the room. But Nathan stopped himself, because suddenly he understood something important. People who are determined to underestimate you will always find reasons to keep you small, no matter what you accomplish. So instead of wasting energy proving himself to people who had already decided his value, Nathan quietly got into his truck and drove away without saying goodbye to anyone. That drive home changed him more than he realized at the time. Somewhere, between the empty highways and lonely streetlights, Nathan finally stopped craving approval from his family. Their opinions no longer felt like truth. They were simply limitations created by people who never bothered to understand him. Back inside his freezing warehouse later that night, Nathan stared at the unfinished battery prototype sitting on his workbench. For the first time in years, he no longer saw it as a desperate dream. He saw it as his escape. And what the Hale family still did not realize was that every joke they made about Nathan was slowly pushing him toward a future where none of them would ever be able to laugh at him again. Nobody saw the nights Nathan Hale nearly gave up, because failure is invisible when nobody cares enough to look closely. To his family, Nathan was simply the son who wasted his life fixing cars in a tiny garage, while his older brother Dominic became more successful every year. But behind the silence, behind the grease-stained clothes and exhausted eyes, Nathan was fighting a battle nobody around him could even imagine. Every night after leaving the garage, he drove across town to an abandoned warehouse he secretly rented, using almost every dollar he had left. After paying rent and bills, the building was freezing during winter and unbearably hot during summer, but Nathan did not care anymore. That warehouse had become the only place where he felt his future still existed. Inside, scattered across old tables and shelves, were wires, broken batteries, damaged tools, and stacks of notebooks filled with calculations nobody in his family would have understood. While Dominic attended luxury business events surrounded by wealthy investors, Nathan spent his nights alone teaching himself advanced engineering concepts through outdated online lectures and borrowed textbooks with torn covers. Most people would have quit after a few months. Nathan kept going for years. The hardest part was not the exhaustion. It was the loneliness. There were nights when Nathan stared at failed battery prototypes for hours, wondering if his family had been right about him all along. Sometimes his experiments exploded in sparks that filled the warehouse with smoke. Sometimes entire weeks of progress disappeared because of one tiny mistake. More than once, Nathan sat alone on the cold concrete floor, with his head in his hands, questioning whether he was destroying his own future, chasing an impossible dream. Meanwhile, life outside the warehouse only became more humiliating. Dominic's success continued growing rapidly, while Nathan's life appeared completely unchanged. At family dinners, relatives openly compared them without shame. Nathan's father constantly praised Dominic's intelligence while speaking about Nathan, like he was someone who simply lacked ambition. One evening during dinner, Nathan quietly mentioned he had been studying new energy systems after work. His father immediately laughed. "You spend too much time fantasizing instead of facing reality." Dominic smirked before adding, "Nathan probably thinks he's going to invent something revolutionary from that little warehouse." The table burst into laughter again. Nathan stayed silent, but inside, something burned painfully in his chest. Because the truth was, he had already sacrificed almost everything for that warehouse. He stopped going out with friends. He rarely bought new clothes. Some months he survived on instant noodles because every extra dollar went into materials and equipment for his research. But nobody saw sacrifice when it came from Nathan. They only saw failure because failure was easier to mock. Yet despite all the humiliation, Nathan refused to quit. Every insult slowly transformed into fuel. Every laugh from his family pushed him harder toward proving that his life meant more than the role they had assigned him. Deep inside, Nathan understood something his family never did. Sometimes the people who appear lost are actually building something quietly while everyone else is distracted by appearances. Late one night after another failed experiment, Nathan sat staring at a damaged battery cell under the dim warehouse lights. His hands trembled from exhaustion and frustration. For a moment he honestly considered giving up completely. Nobody believed in him anyway. Nobody expected him to succeed. Maybe walking away would finally end the pain. But then Nathan remembered every joke, every disappointed look, every moment his family made him feel small. And instead of quitting, he stood back up. That night became the turning point. Nathan started working even harder than before. He studied until sunrise, tested new materials, redesigned entire systems, and slowly began solving problems that had defeated him for years. What the Hale family never realized was that while they spent years laughing at Nathan for being different, he was quietly becoming stronger than all of them emotionally. Pain had given him discipline, rejection had given him focus, and loneliness had taught him how to survive without approval from anyone. Sometimes the people who look weakest from the outside are secretly becoming impossible to break. If you believe Nathan deserves better, comment the number 2 below, because his biggest breakthrough is finally getting closer than anyone could imagine. The email arrived at the exact moment Nathan Hale had almost convinced himself that his dream was dying. After another exhausting day at the garage, he returned to his freezing warehouse, long after midnight, physically drained and emotionally numb. Oil stains covered his hands, unpaid bills sat piled inside his truck, and the latest battery prototype on his workbench had failed only hours earlier. Nathan stared at the damaged equipment under the dim lights and wondered how much longer he could continue living like this. For years he had sacrificed everything, chasing an idea nobody believed in. His family mocked him constantly, his bank account barely survived month to month, and even he had started questioning whether his research meant anything at all. That night felt different somehow. He sat alone in silence, listening to rain hit the warehouse roof, while thoughts of giving up filled his mind. Then his phone vibrated. At first Nathan ignored it, assuming it was another overdue payment reminder. But when the screen lit up again, he noticed an unfamiliar company name attached to the email notification. He opened it slowly, expecting spam or some kind of mistake. Instead, his entire world changed in seconds. The message came from a technology investment firm based in California. They explained that one of their analysts had discovered Nathan's old patent filing connected to advanced battery systems. At first, Nathan genuinely thought someone was playing a cruel joke on him. Nobody important had ever taken his work seriously before. Yet the email continued with a direct request for a private meeting regarding potential investment opportunities. Nathan reread the message at least 10 times because it felt impossible to believe. His hands trembled slightly as he sat frozen in front of the screen. For years, the people around him had treated his research like a fantasy created by a desperate mechanic who could not accept reality. Now suddenly strangers with money, influence, and real industry experience wanted to hear his ideas. Nathan barely slept that night. His mind raced endlessly between hope and fear. Part of him imagined this could finally become the breakthrough he had spent years waiting for. Another part feared humiliation if the meeting turned out to be nothing more than false excitement. Still deep inside, something felt different. For the first time in years, Nathan sensed that maybe his sacrifices had not been meaningless after all. A week later, wearing the only formal shirt he owned, Nathan traveled to California, carrying a worn backpack filled with blueprints, research notes, and prototype photographs. Walking into the enormous glass office building nearly overwhelmed him. Wealthy executives in expensive suits moved confidently through the lobby, while Nathan felt painfully out of place. He could still remember Dominic's voice mocking him for dreaming too big. He could still hear relatives laughing about his little warehouse experiments. But despite the fear building inside him, Nathan forced himself forward. Inside the conference room, several investors sat waiting quietly, while Nathan nervously arranged his research across the table. At first, his voice shook slightly as he explained the technology, but within minutes something unexpected happened. Instead of mocking him, the investors listened carefully. They asked intelligent questions. They studied his designs seriously. One older investor eventually leaned forward and stared directly at Nathan before saying something he would never forget. "Do you realize what this could become if it works at scale?" Nathan could barely answer. Nobody had ever spoken about his work with respect before. The meeting lasted hours longer than expected. By the end, the investors requested additional testing data and invited Nathan back for further discussions. When he finally walked outside into the California sunlight, Nathan stood motionless for several seconds, trying to process what had just happened. For years, his family made him feel invisible, foolish, and small. Yet complete strangers had just looked at him like someone whose ideas actually mattered. That moment changed something deep inside Nathan forever. He realized success often arrives quietly long before the world notices it. And sometimes the people who laugh at your dream the hardest are simply unable to imagine how powerful it might eventually become. The same family that once laughed at Nathan Hale would soon be staring at his face on television without realizing the man they were admiring was the son they had spent years humiliating. After the meeting in California, everything in Nathan's life began changing faster than he could process. The investment firm did not just believe in his battery technology, they believed it had the potential to transform the entire energy industry. For the first time in his life, Nathan found himself surrounded by people who listened carefully when he spoke, instead of interrupting him with sarcasm. Engineers, analysts, and investors studied his research with serious attention while asking questions that pushed his ideas even further. It felt unreal. Only months earlier, Nathan had been working alone inside a freezing warehouse, while his family mocked him for wasting his life. Now executives from billion-dollar companies wanted private meetings with him. The first major investment deal changed everything overnight. Nathan finally had access to professional laboratories, advanced equipment, and teams capable of helping him develop his prototypes properly. He no longer needed to survive on instant noodles or spend sleepless nights repairing broken tools by himself. For the first time in years, he could focus entirely on building the future he had imagined for so long. But success brought something unexpected with its silence. Nathan stopped attending most family gatherings, not because he hated them, but because he no longer recognized the version of himself they still believed existed. While his family continued seeing him as the struggling mechanic from the garage, Nathan quietly became the founder of one of the fastest-growing clean energy companies in the country. His technology started attracting attention across the business world after independent testing showed results far beyond industry expectations. News articles described his designs as revolutionary. Investors competed for opportunities to work with him. Industry conferences invited him to speak beside some of the most powerful names in technology. One morning, Nathan walked past a newsstand and froze when he saw his own face printed across the cover of a major business magazine. The headline called him the quiet genius reshaping global energy. For several seconds, Nathan simply stared at the magazine in disbelief. He remembered every painful joke, every dismissive laugh, every moment people made him feel small for dreaming too big. Now suddenly the same type of people who once ignored him were praising him publicly. Yet despite the growing fame, Nathan kept his success hidden from his family. He changed phone numbers, avoided interviews connected to his hometown, and never once contacted Dominic about his company. Deep inside, Nathan needed to know something important. If his family ever discovered the truth, would they suddenly love him because he had become successful, or had they truly cared about him all along? The answer terrified him more than failure ever had. Meanwhile, Dominic continued living as though he remained the most successful person in the Hale family. At dinners and social events, he still joked about Nathan fixing cars somewhere. Nathan's parents rarely corrected anyone because they genuinely believed nothing significant had changed in his life. Ironically, while Dominic bragged about luxury projects and wealthy connections, Nathan was quietly becoming richer and more influential than anyone in the family could imagine. His company expanded internationally. Celebrities and politicians attended his events. Private jets, luxury hotels, and elite business conferences slowly became part of his new reality. Yet emotionally, part of Nathan still felt like the invisible son standing alone outside family gatherings, listening to laughter through closed windows. Success changed his circumstances, but it did not erase the scars left by years of humiliation. One evening, while sitting alone in his oceanfront Malibu home, Nathan scrolled through old family photos on his phone. He stopped at a picture from years earlier, showing Dominic smiling proudly beside their parents, while Nathan stood awkwardly near the edge of the frame. Looking at that image, Nathan realized something heartbreaking. They had never truly seen him. Not the real version of him. Not the lonely man sacrificing everything for a dream nobody believed in. And now the world finally recognized his value long before his own family ever did. If you believe Nathan's journey proves that quiet people are often fighting the biggest battles, don't forget to like and subscribe, because the next chapter will completely change the Hale family forever. The moment Nathan Hale feared for years finally arrived in the most unexpected way possible. And when his family discovered the truth about him, nothing inside the Hale family would ever feel the same again. It happened on an ordinary Sunday evening, while Nathan's parents hosted another family dinner filled with the usual conversations about money, success, and Dominic's latest business achievements. Dominic sat proudly at the center of attention once again, casually describing a luxury hotel project to relatives who listened as if every word came from a genius. Nathan's name appeared only briefly during the evening, mostly as part of old jokes everyone had repeated for years. "I still wonder if Nathan even owns a suit yet," one uncle laughed. Dominic smirked before replying, "Why would he need one? Engine oil probably counts as formal wear where he works." The room burst into laughter, exactly like always. Nathan's mother shook her head while smiling, softly pretending the jokes were harmless. Nobody noticed how cruel it all sounded anymore, because humiliating Nathan had slowly become normal family entertainment. Then everything changed in seconds. Dominic's girlfriend suddenly walked into the dining room, holding her phone with a shocked expression on her face. "Wait, hold on," she said nervously. "Isn't this Nathan?" The entire table turned toward her. On the phone screen was a live television interview from an international technology conference in Singapore. Standing under bright stage lights in an expensive black suit was Nathan Hale. Calm, confident, powerful. Behind him, massive screens displayed the logo of his global clean energy company, while reporters surrounded him asking questions about the future of sustainable technology. For several seconds, nobody at the table said a single word. Dominic stared at the screen in complete disbelief, while Nathan's mother slowly lowered her fork with trembling hands. The television host introduced Nathan as one of the most influential innovators in modern energy systems, mentioning billion-dollar partnerships, international expansion, and groundbreaking technology already reshaping entire industries. Dominic laughed awkwardly, at first convinced there had to be some misunderstanding. "That can't be our Nathan," he said immediately. "There's no way." But then, the camera zoomed closer. It was undeniably him. The same quiet younger brother they spent years mocking at family dinners was now standing on one of the biggest technology stages in the world, while global investors applauded his work. Nathan's father grabbed the phone silently and turned up the volume. The room remained frozen as Nathan calmly answered questions about leadership, sacrifice, and innovation. At one point, the interviewer asked how he handled years of doubt while building his company from nothing. Nathan paused briefly before giving an answer that made the entire Hale family uncomfortable. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the people closest to you are the first ones to underestimate your potential. You learn very quickly that belief in yourself becomes more important than approval from others." Silence crushed the room after those words. Nobody laughed anymore. Nathan's mother looked devastated, while Dominic's confident expression slowly disappeared. For the first time in years, the Hale family was being forced to confront a painful truth they never wanted to admit. They had completely misjudged the quiet son they treated like a failure. And now the world respected him more than any of them ever had. The interview continued, revealing details that shocked everyone even further. Nathan's company operated internationally. Major governments were investing in his technology. Business magazines called him one of the most important innovators of his generation. Dominic sat motionless, staring at the screen, while relatives exchanged uncomfortable looks around the table. Suddenly, every cruel joke they had ever made sounded ugly instead of funny. Every dismissive comment now felt embarrassing. And perhaps the most painful realization of all was this: Nathan had achieved everything without any support from the people who should have believed in him first. Later that night, after the interview ended, nobody at dinner seemed interested in talking about Dominic's projects anymore. The entire emotional balance inside the Hale family had shifted permanently. For years they built their identities around admiring one son while overlooking the other. Now they were realizing the son they ignored had quietly become extraordinary while they were too distracted by appearances to notice. If you want to see what happens when Nathan finally comes face to face with his family again, make sure to subscribe because the next chapter becomes even more emotional. Nothing destroys arrogance faster than realizing the person you mocked for years became someone the entire world respects. After the shocking interview in Singapore, the Hale family could no longer pretend Nathan was the unsuccessful son they had laughed about for so long. The atmosphere inside the house changed completely after the television screen went dark. Nobody touched their food anymore. Nobody continued the conversation. The same relatives who once joked about Nathan's life now sat in uncomfortable silence, replaying every cruel moment in their minds. Dominic looked especially shaken. For years he had built his identity around being the successful son, the admired one, the person everyone compared Nathan against. But now the comparison had suddenly reversed in the most humiliating way possible. Nathan was no longer the invisible mechanic working in a tiny garage. He was a global innovator standing on international stages. While world leaders and billion-dollar investors listened to his ideas, Dominic could barely process it. "Why didn't he tell us?" Nathan's mother whispered softly, still staring at the black television screen, as if she expected Nathan to appear again. But nobody answered her, because deep down everyone already knew the truth. Nathan probably stayed silent because they had spent years teaching him that his dreams would only be mocked inside that house. Nathan's father slowly stood from the dinner table and walked toward the window with a devastated expression. Memories started flooding his mind all at once. He remembered laughing when Nathan talked about energy systems during dinner years earlier. He remembered calling his son unrealistic, irresponsible, and immature for chasing impossible ideas. Worst of all, he remembered how many times Nathan sat silently listening, while the rest of the family treated him like a disappointment. For the first time, guilt hit him harder than pride ever had. Dominic reacted differently. At first, he tried pretending the situation did not bother him. He laughed nervously and claimed Nathan's success was probably exaggerated by the media. But even he could hear how weak his own words sounded. Deep inside, Dominic understood something painful. The younger brother he spent years humiliating had quietly surpassed him in every possible way. The next morning, the entire Hale family woke up to headlines filled with Nathan's name. Business channels discussed his revolutionary energy company non-stop. Social media exploded with clips from the Singapore interview. One article even described Nathan as the future of sustainable technology. Relatives who ignored Nathan for years suddenly started calling Nathan's parents, asking questions about him. Some acted proud, others sounded shocked, a few even pretended they had always believed in Nathan. The hypocrisy made Dominic furious, because he knew most of them had laughed at Nathan just as much as he had. Meanwhile, Nathan remained completely silent. No phone calls, no messages, no reaction at all. That silence hurt the Hale family more than anger would have. Because now, they were forced to face the possibility that Nathan no longer needed them emotionally anymore. Days later, Nathan's mother finally gathered enough courage to call his old number, only to discover it had been disconnected long ago. The realization broke something inside her. She sat at the kitchen table holding her phone, while tears filled her eyes. We pushed him away, she whispered quietly. And we didn't even notice. Even Dominic started losing confidence in himself. For years, success had come easily to him because he always had support, encouragement, and family admiration behind him. Nathan had achieved far more completely alone. That truth became impossible for Dominic to ignore. One evening, while scrolling through online interviews about Nathan's company, Dominic found an old photo from a charity event. Nathan stood beside famous entrepreneurs and politicians, wearing the same calm expression he always had at family dinners. But now people looked at him with respect instead of pity. In that moment, Dominic finally understood the cruelest part of everything. Nathan had never actually been less intelligent or less capable than him. The family simply never bothered to look beyond appearances long enough to notice it. And by the time they finally realized who Nathan truly was, he had already built an entire life without them. The hardest apology to accept is the one that arrives only after people realize you became successful without them. Weeks after the Hale family discovered the truth about Nathan, the silence inside the house became unbearable. Every conversation somehow circled back to him. His interviews played constantly across television channels. Business magazines praised his company almost daily. Relatives who once ignored him suddenly acted proud to share the same last name. But instead of feeling excited, Nathan's parents felt something far heavier growing inside them: regret. They could no longer escape the painful reality that they had spent years humiliating the one person in the family who needed support the most. Dominic suffered quietly too, though he would never admit it openly. Everywhere he went, people started asking him about Nathan instead of his own projects. Investors who once admired Dominic now seemed far more interested in meeting his younger brother. For the first time in his life, Dominic understood what it felt like to stand in someone else's shadow. One evening, after another uncomfortable family dinner filled with tension and silence, Nathan's mother finally broke down, crying at the table. "We failed him," she whispered through tears. "We failed our own son." Nobody argued with her, because deep down, everyone knew she was right. Nathan's father stared silently at his untouched plate, while guilt crushed him harder, with every memory returning to his mind. He remembered the times Nathan tried explaining his research only to be laughed at. He remembered dismissing Nathan's dreams as childish fantasies. But the memory that haunted him most was seeing how often Nathan sat quietly during family gatherings, almost as if he already knew nobody cared about what he felt. Dominic finally stood up from the table and walked outside into the cold night air. For years he convinced himself the jokes about Nathan were harmless. He believed teasing his younger brother made him appear funnier, smarter, more successful. But now he saw the truth clearly for the first time. Every joke had slowly pushed Nathan further away from the family, until eventually Nathan built an entirely new life, where none of them existed anymore. A few days later, Nathan's mother made a decision that terrified her. She wanted to see him in person. Through several business contacts and endless searching online, she finally discovered Nathan would be attending a major charity gala in Los Angeles. The entire Hale family traveled there, nervously unsure whether Nathan would even speak to them. The event itself felt unreal to them. Cameras flashed everywhere. Wealthy entrepreneurs and celebrities filled the ballroom, while giant screens displayed Nathan's company logo, beside words like innovation, leadership, and global impact. Then they saw him. Nathan stood near the center of the room, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit, while investors and politicians surrounded him. He looked calm, confident, and completely different from the quiet mechanic they once mocked at family dinners. Yet at the same time, something in his eyes still looked painfully familiar. When Nathan finally noticed his family standing across the ballroom, the entire room seemed to disappear for a moment. Silence hung heavily between them. Nathan's mother stepped forward, first tears already filling her eyes. "Nathan," she whispered shakily. For several seconds, nobody moved. Dominic looked unable to meet his brother's eyes, while Nathan's father stood frozen with guilt written all over his face. Then Nathan spoke quietly, but his voice carried years of hidden pain beneath it. "You only came because the world decided I mattered." The words hit harder than any angry scream ever could. Nathan's mother immediately started crying harder, while Dominic lowered his head in shame. Because deep down, they knew he was right. Nathan had spent years begging silently for love, respect, and belief from his family. Instead, they gave those things only after strangers taught them his value. But despite everything, Nathan did not sound hateful anymore. He sounded tired, like someone who had spent too many years carrying emotional wounds alone. And in that heartbreaking moment, the Hale family finally understood the true cost of treating one child like he mattered less than another. If you think Nathan deserved love long before success made him famous, comment the number 8 below. Sometimes the deepest wounds in a family are not caused by hatred. They are caused by years of quiet neglect that slowly convince one person they were never truly valued at all. After the emotional confrontation at the charity gala in Los Angeles, Nathan Hale disappeared from his family's life once again. But this time the silence felt completely different. Before, the Hale family ignored Nathan because they believed he would never become important. Now they could not stop thinking about him because they finally understood how badly they had failed him. Days turned into weeks, yet Nathan never returned their calls. His mother left emotional voicemails almost every night, apologizing repeatedly through tears. His father tried writing long messages explaining how blind he had been. Even Dominic sent a short text saying, "I'm sorry for everything." But Nathan answered none of them. Not because he hated his family. The truth was more painful than anger. Nathan simply did not know how to trust people who only saw his value after the world recognized it first. Meanwhile, his company continued, growing at an unbelievable speed. Nathan traveled constantly between countries, signed major international agreements, and appeared on magazine covers around the world. Publicly, he looked unstoppable. But privately, loneliness still followed him everywhere. One night after finishing a conference in London, Nathan sat alone inside his hotel suite, staring at the city lights outside the window. Despite all the success surrounding him, he could not stop thinking about the look on his mother's face at the gala. For years, Nathan imagined becoming successful would heal every emotional scar his family left behind. But now he understood something difficult. Success can change how the world sees you, but it cannot erase the memories of how the people closest to you once made you feel. A few days later, Nathan received unexpected news from an old family friend. His father had suffered a serious health scare and was recovering at home. The message ended with a simple sentence that stayed in Nathan's mind for hours. "Your father keeps asking if you'll come back." Nathan tried ignoring it at first. Part of him still felt deeply hurt by everything his family had done, but another part remembered something important. Despite all the mistakes, despite all the years of disappointment and emotional distance, they were still his family. Late that night, Nathan boarded a private flight back home, for the first time in years. The moment he stepped into the old family house again, emotions hit him harder than expected. Almost nothing had changed. The same family photos still covered the walls. The same dining table, where relatives once laughed at his dreams, still stood in the center of the room. But this time, the atmosphere felt completely different. There was no arrogance anymore. No mocking jokes. Only regret. Nathan's mother burst into tears the moment she saw him walk through the door. She hugged him tightly, like she was terrified he might disappear again. His father looked older, weaker, and far more emotional than Nathan had ever seen before. For several long seconds, neither of them knew what to say. Finally, Nathan's father spoke quietly. "I spent years believing success meant being admired by other people," he said painfully. "But I failed at the one thing that mattered most. I failed my own son." Nathan remained silent, but his eyes slowly filled with emotion. Then Dominic stepped forward awkwardly, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I was jealous of you," he admitted quietly. "Even before you became successful, you kept chasing your dream, no matter how badly everyone treated you. I don't think I could have survived what you did." That confession shocked Nathan more than anything else. For the first time in his life, Dominic sounded honest instead of proud. And in that moment, Nathan finally realized something important. Forgiveness does not erase the pain people caused you, but sometimes it allows you to stop carrying that pain alone forever. The Hale family spent the rest of the night talking honestly for the first time in years. No comparisons, no insults, no pretending, just a broken family finally trying to heal. And while some scars never fully disappear, that night proved something powerful. Sometimes people realize your worth too late. But love can still survive if the heart remains open long enough to let it back in.